Andy Good here with the Good Life YouTube channel, and today we are learning about emergency communications and how to treat wounds with honey and propolis at the 2025 Georgia Bushcraft Spring Campout.
Everybody had a good time on this Friday of Georgia Bushcraft 2025 spring event. All right, I hope everybody's had a great time. I know it's been a little hot, but at least it hasn't been a little wet.
Let me ask you, when you guys go camping or when you go out to an event or whether you're traveling, do you guys have any kind of emergency communication plans or any communication plan? Everybody just rely right here on this? Right?
We do.
Well, and I say that because 90% of the time that's going to work for you. So my question to you would be this: anytime you're planning a trip, anytime you're looking at that, put a plan together besides relying on this, right? It may be just as easy as finding a weather radio to know what the weather is. It may be that you end up with a GMRS radio, right? This is a specific radio for specific GMRS applications. Then you got your little HTs. This guy will do, I think, 10 watts, up to 10 watts, maybe 8. I can't remember. It's been so long since I bought this thing. But this is a ham radio, which requires a license, and we'll talk more about that. And then I've got a portable system that I carry around for things like this, so I can stay camping and do all that stuff. And that's a 10-watt radio also. Well, 5 watts, 10 watts when you plug it up to a battery power system that I use to charge my cell phone too, so there's that. The cell phone works great when it works, but when it doesn't work, I get out in the social circle in areas like that I know that I don't have service, and it's terrible for me, right? We are a plugged-in community. So those that have GMRS licenses knows that it is a non-tested license. So you can go to the FCC, you can pay them $35, you can get you a GMRS. It takes about 10 days for them to assign you a license number for it. Great part about the GMRS stuff, the licenses, and one license covers your whole family.
And it's good for 10 years.
10 years. Yep.
Household.
Yeah, so family household. Yep. So it is channelized, kind of like CB. Anybody familiar with CB radio? CB radio is channelized. This is channelized, and it uses what they call the ultra high frequency band. And it's, I mean, you just turn it on, and it's really, really easy. You just go through your channels. You have what they call simplex channels, which is direct communication from one radio to another. And then you have what they call repeaters or duplex communication, which means it transmits, goes to something similar to a cellular tower, right? And then it rebroadcasts that information out through that repeater. So if you're not familiar with any of that stuff, we can go into more details of the significance behind it. So it just bounces that information from tower to tower, and that's what's great about that. And they do the same. It uses the same technology. The cellular technology derived from that kind of stuff. So that's how people don't realize the backwardness that this thing has from where this is. So same thing in ham radio. They make repeaters for that. They also have simplex as well. And that's on certain frequencies, ultra high frequency, very high frequency, or we call it UHF, VHF for those that have the TVs that went click, 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 click. FRS, another type of radio out there that's so GMRS gives you the ability to take the antenna off. So FRS radios, like you would buy at Walmart, those walkie-talkies they call them, those are FRS radios. Those have fixed things, and the FCC says you can't take the
Can't modify it.
Yeah, can't modify it. That's the word. I think that's how Part 97 reads. So VHF radio, right? This thing right here, excellent for local communications. Typically, if you've got clear line of sight, 5 to 7 miles, right? On 5 watts. You get in GMRS and you can get up to 50 watt mobile radios, what they call them, and you can get a bit further. Typically, the more power you give it, obviously the further distance that you can get out. Now, when we get into ham radio, right, it's a little bit different. You got a handheld that goes, that one does, I think 8 or 10, I can't remember which, 8 or 10 watts. So you got double your power from your GMRS, right? Then you've got other radios. We'll just use this one as an example. That you have what they call you can go up to a legal limit, and that legal limit is 1,500 watts. A ham radio you can operate within, so there's 3 different, let me finish my statement here. You can operate up to 1,500 watts of radio power with a ham license. There's some restrictions behind that, but we'll go into that in just a minute. More power, they do different types. This is we talked about line of sight and repeaters, right? So this guy actually bounces off the Earth's atmosphere, and they call that high frequency, or HF. And it goes up, hits the atmosphere just like an AM radio station does. Hits that atmosphere, and then it goes out, and then it hits, we call them spots. It'll hit an area based upon how it bounces off that ionosphere. So I may use that one frequency and hit Texas today, and it may hit California in 20 minutes. So it does change based upon how the atmosphere either absorbs or how the atmosphere reflects. That's an antenna for an HF radio. 64 feet long, it's not real big, right? So with that, I can talk all the way around the world. I've talked to New Zealand and South Korea just as of last week. Depending on which way you look at it, we have channelized things, and then we call it in meters because it's basically measured by the wavelength of stuff. So yeah. So back to licensing. GMRS is a $35 fee, covers the whole family, right? We talked about that. Ham radio, a little bit more involved. It requires a test, and there's 3 different levels. You have a technician, you have a general, and you have an amateur extra. All right, and that amateur extra gives you the most bandwidth with the most privileges. As a technician, you get a little bit of that high frequency privilege, but you can also do anything on what they call 2 meter or 144 megahertz, and VHF, that's VHF, and then UHF, which is 440 megahertz. This one actually gets programmed from a computer, so you can program channels in, so you don't have to remember it. It used to not be that way back in the day, but we're always practicing. And I can tell you, if you put a communication plan in place, make sure you practice that communication plan, because when it actually hits the fan, that's a whole different level of stress. You got to practice it. It's not just it's one of those, you got to do it. And if you're not doing it, it's gonna, when the time comes, there's going to be follies. So this is your least invasive way of getting into emergency communications outside of satellite radio and outside of having to take a test. There's a couple of groups out there that's in the ham radio community that's specifically tailored towards emergency communication. One is called the Amateur Radio Emergency Communications is what it's called, services. And that group right there is county by county set up. So, you know, out here it would be Oconee County. Athens, Clark County would be local too. I'm in Barrow County. I'm a part of that group also. So each emergency coordinator for every county has a group of amateur radio operators to communicate with. And typically, what people don't realize is those are inside the hospitals. Hospital communications is key and critical, especially during a natural disaster. And I'll tell you, when the government all goes to shit, and if it goes all to shit, right? Pardon my language, I'm sorry. If it all goes in a handbasket, it's going to be your local community that's going to help you out. It's going to be your neighbor that lives next door. And I know we have become I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a minute. We've all been enamored by this telephone, right? And we are all in it, and we are less person-to-person contact probably as a society than we ever have. That's why I like coming to these events, because I can talk to people about that face-to-face communication and how important it is for us, you know. So great piece to keep you plugged in, but also not so much that you lose sight of who your neighbor is and the community that you live in and the community that you, like me, work in. Well, I mean, I've talked to people from Ukraine, I've talked to people from Russia, I've talked to people from South Korea, I've talked to New Zealand, I've talked to Australia. I mean, all on that radio that does 10 watts. The amateur radio community does the state of Georgia does a Parks on the Air event, which means everybody that is within the community takes a radio, they go out to one of these sanctioned parks, and they operate, and everybody from across the world searches for these guys.
Yeah, they contest
and they contest and write them all down, and they've got prizes and cool pins and all this other stuff for contacting. I think there's 52 parks that are activating this weekend. Also with this, you can do what they call satellite communication. So if you want to communicate through the International Space Station, that's kind of cool. What's some other stuff? You can bounce it off of the moon. That's kind of cool. So they call that EME, or Earth bounce. So as opposed to to reflecting off of the atmosphere, it actually bounces itself off the moon. And you know, based on what type of antennas that you use, there's a bunch of those that you can take a look at and do that also. Anybody that wants to do a ham radio test or learn how to do that, they make the testing stuff online. You can get it on a website. Hamstudy.org is another one. With the technician's license, you have what they call a limited bandwidth that you can operate on. So if you look at this as your full bandwidth of an amateur extra, which is the highest that you can go, you've got about that much of it. All right. Then you step into the general, and you're like 3/4 of that. So the step from technician to general is huge. And then that amateur extra just gives you that little bit of extra stuff that, if you don't want the riprap, that's where you go. Your technician gives you a UHF, VHF, and limited HF privileges, right? And then your general gives you full HF privileges, and then your amateur extra gives you full HF privileges plus an extended bandwidth above your general. 90% of the time, the general will get you everything that you need to do. If you decide to become a volunteer examiner, which is the people that does all the testing, you'll probably want to look into becoming an amateur extra, because then you can give all 3 tests. As a general, you can only give a technician test. As an amateur extra, you can give an extra, you can give a general, and you can can oversee a technician. Yeah, they have ham. They call them ham fests. There's, like you said, there's like it's a garage sale of everything that was overstocked for somebody else. One man's junk's another man's treasure.
I've been feeling so small. Watch the clock ticking off the wall. But tonight I'm letting it go. Spend my coin for sure. I'm gonna be myself, or I could be someone else. No one's stopping me now. I'm gonna skip my breaks, I'm gonna make mistakes. I just wanna feel alive. It's just what I do when I'm out, so try not to hold me down. Feel alive when I'm in this town. Look at these beautiful stars. I wanna drive a faster car. Nothing can break me, no, nothing can break me. Try not to hold me down. Feel alive when I'm in this town. Look at these beautiful stars. I wanna take a trip to Mars. Nothing can break me, no, nothing can break me. Look at these beautiful stars. I wanna drive a
We're talking about propolis, which is what, if you don't have beads, you won't know what it is. If you have beads, it's the stuff that sticks your hives all together, gets all in your hands, you can't wash it off. That's what propolis is. And that can start being the start part. The reason I produce this propolis is because I produce a veterinary product called Propolis RX for horse wounds on horses' legs, feet, and cancerous growths on their neck and cancerous growths on their nose and mouth, and for animal protection dogs, for sheep dogs and all, because they get cancerous growths on their nose because the sun's shining on them all the time. So this is basically an offshoot of that product, and this is what we have in bushcraft, because this is just a liquid form, spray form of it for cuts, scratches, scrapes, and small open wounds, not anything large product. And what it does is it, by combining the propolis in the form I'm manufacturing in with honey, the honey protects the wound from any kind of outside infiltration of bacteria, viruses or anything. And the propolis is suspended inside the honey, and honey is agroscopic, and so therefore when it pulls moisture in from the outside, it keeps the tissue pliable on the leading edge of the tissue. And the process that's taking place at that time is called reepithelialization. That's the process of growing new tissue. And what this product does, even the spray version of it, it's sort of like a turbo boost for epithelialization. It speeds up the growth of the tissue about a 3x to 5x rate. And the moisture keeps the leading edge of the tissue viable, so it's alive. So anytime you have a wound on your body, the reason you have a scar from it is if you go to a hospital, it's because you saw a doctor. Scars are only created by doctors and nurses. They're not created in the natural world. Because when you get to a hospital, the first thing they do is just scrub the shit out of your wound and pour all kinds of different liquids on it that kills the leading edge of the tissue. And so therefore it can't grow back together. It's not possible because skin doesn't grow from the front, it grows from the back, it grows from the mass. So if you have a slice in the tissue, it doesn't grow at the edge, it grows back here. And it starts expanding and pushes that gap together. And so if the leading edge of that gap is dead, when it comes in contact with each other, it does this. It just pushes up, it grows underneath. That's why you have a scar. The push-up is the scar. So whenever you apply my product to your skin, you don't have the push-up. I'm talking 100% of the time, not 50% of the time, not once in a while, 100% of the time, no matter how large the wound is. Whether it's a third-degree burn or a gunshot wound blowing a hole that big in your body. So, it will actually grow the tissue back with no risen scar in your body. It's 15 years worth of product, not just overnight stuff. It's been in the animal industry for like 13 years. It's all made from the beehive, so it's not like I invented anything except the machinery and the mechanism that turns this. What you see, that big thing there, turn it into this. Catch this, I'll show you. Pass it around. The transport mechanism is when you spray that onto a wound, it transports the propolis to the wound, and the alcohol evaporates. If you scrape this off of the screen, once it hits about 90 degrees, if I put my hand like here and pulled it away, I wouldn't be able to wash it off. I have to go home and scrub it off with a Brillo pad. That's how adhesive it is. So you can't transport it to a wound, except if you need a filling in your tooth. It's kind of funny that back in the 1800s, or back in the Old West days, this is what teeth were fixed with. When you had a cavity, they packed propolis in the cavity. Because first of all, if you have an infection in your tooth because it's all rotted out and everything, the propolis will kill all the bacteria in your tooth immediately. And then it's so hard, it'll harden inside your tooth to become a permanent filling. So, and it's well documented throughout the whole history of propolis. They don't call it propolis, they call it bee gum, G-U-M. And bee gum being used for dental applications. And actually they use it a lot, it's still used in Europe some places, but they use it in the United States up until the late 1800s, early 1900s. So what happens is this process here allows it to be added to a lot of different carriers, variations of carriers, but its most effective process is with truly raw honey or straight alcohol. Any other carrier that you put this in actually detracts from its efficiency because the carrier itself interferes with its ability to stay in place and to be able to operate. In other words, the alcohol just piles it up on top of the wound, which is good. It causes it to stick in there. The honey is using it with the honey is because you want to protect the open wound, the burn of the large open wound, so that nothing else can come in from the outside. And then as moisture passes through the honey, the propolis particles kill all the bacteria and all the viruses and anything that's coming into the water. So the water, in essence, is distilled, purified water once it reaches the wound area. So bees also use it inside their hive to, you see the top of that frame, see how it has those little rectangles on the top? All this whole top is the same material you see right here, it's propolis. And so the bees have an internal attacker called a hive beetle. It comes inside the hive and lays eggs in the cells and grows larvae that eats up all your honey and eats your protein levels in all the cells. So what the bees do if they're highly propolizing bees, not all bees produce this much propolis. There's different strains of each type of bee that can produce more propolis. What they'll do is these are called beetle jails, J-A-I-L-S. What they'll do is the top is on the hive real close, so they'll round up beetles and keep them corralled in a little spot, and the other bees are like to put propolis all around them, create little rectangular jails all the way down the top of all the frames, and the beetles starve to death inside their jail. They can't go anywhere. That's how they can deal with them. So, and then in the process, that material, the propolis doesn't kill them. In fact, they can't get out and eat. That's what kills them. They starve to death. So propolis is used. You can also see on the edge of the frame, see all that built up here. Because when you have frames in a hive, another frame here is a small gap in there. So what they do is they always want to close up every gap in the hive with propolis because that's what they use it for. And so in between frames it'll be on there. You'll see it'll also be where it's touching the hive at. So if you have highly propolizing bees, in the early part of the spring you can't pull the frames out of the hive because the temperature is low, and you can actually break the frames easily. I don't care if you got double nails or whatever you have, it glued or whatever, you can rip the frame apart because the propolis is so sticky. And so you have to you have to wait till you got 65 or 73 days. The way I maximize the production of it, normally you wouldn't have this much propolis in the hive. This was covered completely, but I use this as an example all the time, so it's not falling off. So what I do is I build these boxes for my overwinter hives. They have a tiny little slot there inside, on both sides. That lets the light inside this box shines in, and bees don't like light, so they have to cover up every crack in the hive that's got light shining through it. And that's what they use propolis for. So by putting this wire on the bottom, well then they propolize that whole wire because they can't get to the crack. They can't get up through here to the crack. So they propolize that whole screen. So I wind up having this much propolis out of every hive in the spring, which is about the equivalent you had what's on this one frame, you would normally only scrape off about 30 or 40 hives. If you scrape the tops of all the frames at one time, you get about this amount. But I can get that off of one hive in the spring after one through the winter. And so the way you get it off really easy is I walk in freezers, like a deer freezer, not a cooler, but real freezers. And so when I pull all these off in the spring, I take it to the freezer and stack them up inside and freeze. And then when I get ready to process them, I just take them out of the freezer. I got a big giant granite slab table. I just take them like this, just bam, like that, and it all flies right off on the table because it's frozen. Then you can manage it real quick before the temperature changes. So you can bag it up then, and then it goes to another process after that. That's the initial way to collect it. If not, a beekeeper is normally just scratching it off here with a hive tool. They can run it down to the top, gloves off, stick it in their pocket or put it in a can or something like that. Use it for some things, but most beekeepers don't really do it. It's a nuisance for beekeepers. Every injury you get in bushcraft, you can take care of with this type of application, which is a ball roller application. So if you get a cut or something, it's a slight surface cut, you just roll it on like that. So the process is you want to, whether you're spraying it or rolling it on, you roll it on, it dries if you blow on it one time. You want 3 layers of it on there, like that. You want to build up layers. Once you build up 3 layers, they're all overlapping each other. It's got liquid. It's like a liquid Band-Aid, then sort of, but it becomes sticky and tacky. And that's all you got to put it on. I mean, if you got to cut or scratch, you only got to apply it once. I mean, the scratch will be peeling up the next day. In 3 days, you won't even know it's there. If you look on my Instagram, I put a picture up of the serious cut so you can see how fast it is. But not bad about it. If you got a knife, you cut yourself. If you have a knife, you need Propolis. So anyway, I have a really super sharp knife, and I was pulling out the sheet like middle of March. And I was adjusting the sheet tension, and when I pulled the knife out, my hand went this way. So it sliced my thumb down to the bone on this side. I put the pictures on there. Hit the bone over there. So I put the Propolis on. 4 days, it was completely adhered together enough to where I could take the bandage off. 6 or 7 days, I didn't worry about it. I mean, there's no scar at all on it. Because it doesn't create a scar. It's better than super. So no matter how large the cut is, you can use it either way. You spray, smaller version, you can get it up inside your mouth if you need to. If you got a cold sore, cure it overnight, bite your tongue. Overnight, same way, it'll keep it to it. It has probably the same pain relieving capability as as a prescription dose of Tylenol,